Eternal Champions. We need to finish this trilogy, and let me talk about it right now. My name is Magnus. If you're into nostalgic games, especially them coming back to life, definitely subscribe to this channel with particular emphasis on Shenmue. So today we're going to talk about Eternal Champions, a series that was cancelled off by Sega because they thought Virtua Fighter should be where it's at. Well, let me tell you why Eternal Champions, especially when it comes to the story, needs to live on. Eternal Champions. This franchise made waves back in the early to mid 90s. Let me brief you a little bit more about the game before we move on to why I think this franchise needs to come back. Not with a remake, but with the final chapter. So in the early 90s, fighting games were all the rage thanks to Street Fighter 2 and the Mortal Kombat series. Many companies wanted a piece of the fighting game franchise pie, so Sega decided to dip their hands in with their own original fighting games. One of those games was Virtua Fighter. Virtua Fighter was developed by Sega of Japan, but Sega of America developed Eternal Champions for the Sega Genesis. The marketing behind this game was also a slap in the face to Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter 2 games that did pretty well on the Genesis. But Eternal Champions was meant to be the face of fighting games on the Sega system, and it sold well. A second game was even released to the Sega CD called Eternal Champions Challenge from the Dark Side. If you'd like to know about the story behind the game's development, you should definitely check out these two videos: Flophouse Files from Matt featuring Eternal Champions, and a retrospective on the games by Kim Justice. Totally worth checking out. Now in this video, my mission is to dive into the lore and storyline of the game in order to convince you as well that we need the final chapter to the series. You see, fighting games in the early 90s had some storyline, but were really never too deep into their lore early on. Mortal Kombat, in my opinion, started off great and had a pretty deep story to carry you through the franchise, but with them it was hit or miss with the characters. Street Fighter 2 and their subsequent rehashes had a great roster of characters that were pretty well developed, but the overall storyline was at best a bit vague and really didn't convince you there was a purpose to the story other than to stop Bison or become the best fighter in the world. Eternal Champions, however, makes you understand, care, and sympathize with all of their characters and the lore. So without further ado, let's dive into the story. And yeah, it deals with time and space. It starts off with a being known as the Eternal Champion. Figures he matches the name of the series. Anyway, this being made of light exists in a domain that is a fighting complex. This complex is said to exist in a place that was corrupted by centuries of misuse and destruction. Well, if you're in a fighting complex, why would the place be messed up? Anyway, this guy's main purpose is kind of a yin and yang character, which seems to be a strong theme in the series, balancing good, evil, light, darkness, and everything else that needs balance. So according to him, apparently he must have been asleep in his job because he says the balance had been lost, so the world is going to be basically destroyed. He then says that 9 individuals from various moments in time were killed while he was distracted or something. These individuals apparently could have tipped the scales for good if they lived and weren't killed off in circumstances they couldn't control. So basically, the Eternal Champion decides to harness all the power he's gathered for centuries to accomplish one task. How did he harness this energy? Well, because his very existence is based on all the great martial arts masters that have existed before him. All of their skill, wisdom, inner strength was stored in this Eternal Champion for the whole time.
What the hell?
At this point, you just gotta go with it. He's a badass and he can do things no one can. Anyway, with all this power he's stored, he's able to gather all 9 individuals that can change the fate of the world, only if they're not killed. However, he only needs one of them to live, while the others can perish. I guess he feels one is good enough to not tip the scales and make the world too good. Like I said, he's all about balance. So rather than just play eeny, meeny, miny, moe, or just flip a coin, he decides to have all 9 of them have a small martial arts tournament. The winner of the tournament would then have to fight the Eternal Champion. Why? Well, my guess is that he just wants to super duper make sure that they're ready. That's all I could come up with. So now we've got the setup, and the contest may begin. So now as a player, you pick a combatant and fight. In regards to the fighting, the control scheme mimics the same 6-button combination as Street Fighter, but with special moves limited by a yin and yang symbol next to the health bar. When the symbol is completely depleted, you can't perform any more special moves, but you can still fight until it regains some energy back. The fighting styles and animations in this game were pretty impressive at the time. The characters were large, animations were solid, and backgrounds were pretty good. If I were to say anything about the fighting, it would be that the fighting system was a bit cheap. Though the moves were impressive and creative, hitting your opponent pretty much freezes them in place, and pulling off combos can either be too easy or too hard. There was also no air juggling permitted, and when you threw or hit somebody, they would really fly across the screen. Even the jumps that characters pulled off were just incredibly exaggerated. Anyway, back to the story. For this story, let's walk through it as if we were the character known as Trident. I want to focus on one character's story, that way we can get invested in one story and progress the telling of the tale going forward. But honestly, any character you pick will have a pretty deep storyline of their own. So Trident's story is a bit of this. First off, the dude lost his hand because he was fighting a shark, so he got the name Trident because they replaced his hand with a trident. Oh, and by the way, this guy's from 110 BC, from the city of Atlantis. Though this was before Atlantis allegedly sunk into the ocean. For some unexplained reason at the time, the people of Atlantis were competing with Romans to see who would control the entire Earth's surface. I don't even understand why they would need to compete for that, but whatever. So during this time of competitions, Atlanteans knew that a big portion of land would sink into the ocean. So they built giant domes and all that so that they can live underwater if necessary. Then they went to the Romans and were like, hey yo, let's just split this. Some people go underwater, some people stay on land, and we can just share everything. Nope. Romans were like, let's fight. So the Atlanteans, being the scientific smart people that they were, genetically engineered a warrior to fight for them. And the guy was Trident. So a fight was set up between Trident and one of the Roman champions. However, before a real fight could even take place, the Romans crushed Trident under a large stone pillar. Ouch. This forced all the Atlanteans to live underwater, with their tech and their culture lost forever. But we all know what happened. The Eternal Champion saved him just in the nick of time for this tournament. So now Trident's got to prepare to face off against 8 other opponents before he can be brought back. Trident was genetically engineered to fight, and he's a master of capoeira fighting. How he could adopt this Brazilian form of combat in 110 BC is beyond me. But hey, here you go. So the tournament takes place with backgrounds that are reflective of the time periods where the warriors came from Atlantis to the rooftops of Tokyo. Though the backgrounds themselves were very creative, there's one thing that always bothered me. Take a look at the floor in Street Fighter II Champion Edition when you scroll left and right on the Genesis. Now take a look at the floor in Eternal Champions. It doesn't use vanishing point scrolling on the floor. Yeah, that's nitpicky, but it's a thing that bothered me. Anyway, from this point, you're fighting in the tournament. And as you're fighting, it's just 2 out of 3 rounds, then you move on. Here's an interesting true story for you guys. I first played this game when I was 13 years old back in 1994 when the Genesis was relevant. This game was rated MA13 before the ESRB was created. Basically, it's an equivalent system to the teen rating. I didn't think much of it as it was similar rating to that of Street Fighter II Special Champion Edition. Mortal Kombat 2 had a rating of MA17, which was the same as mature. Okay, so this game was cartoony, plays closer to Street Fighter, it's all good. Then, while playing as Trident, something like this happened. Holy! I just popped out. I checked the box art again. Yep, it's MA13. This must have gotten past whoever rated this game. I totally can't blame them because there's no indication of bloody finishes. And this game's got them. But then again, when I think about it, the original Mortal Kombat also got away with a pretty tame rating because whoever rated it must not have known the blood code. In any case, this tournament was a fight to the death for the combatants, with only one winner. So after fighting the other fighters, your last opponent is the Eternal Champion. This is it. Trident will defeat this guy and then undo whatever happened to him. Though the fight seemed pretty easy at first, this dude gets up, changes his powers, and fights you again and again. He really makes you earn it. So after a tough battle and beating the Eternal Champion, he sends Trident back with the knowledge of what's about to happen. So, when Trident returns, he avoids the falling pillar and goes right after the Roman for a fair fight. Then, not only does Trident not finish off his opponent in the end, but he convinces the Romans and the Atlanteans to get along and live in harmony. The ending also mentions that the Great Wars never happened because these guys basically ruled sea and space. Truly badass. So was that the end? Well, no. The story goes on. But why? Well, here's the explanation. Apparently, a sequel was released for the Sega CD called Eternal Champions Challenge from the Dark Side. So let's dive right into the story of the sequel. Let's see what happened. So strangely, an intro is displayed explaining the same exact story as the first game. But isn't this a sequel? What's going on here? One thing that's cool is that the game has some pretty cool intros that are fully pre-rendered. Now this may look pretty primitive and low res right now, but back in 1995, this was so awesome. You've got to understand, this was still roughly in the age of Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis, so this was just amazing for me to see and hear. Yeah, PlayStation and Saturn were relevant in 95, but for most kids my age, none of us had the new consoles yet, and I knew that I had to settle for this. Anyway, while watching the intro, new characters were revealed. I thought 9 characters were only necessary to save the world. Why add more? Doesn't it complicate things? Well, apparently, we suddenly get an appearance from the Dark Eternal Champion. He makes it clear that the Eternal Champion did not notice the new contestants. You see, the Dark Champion was around the whole time, but hid the other combatants. This had an effect on the timeline, causing time to reset and everything would have to take place again and again for eternity. However, the Dark Champion for some reason got sick of just having everything play over and over again, so he let the Eternal Champion unknowingly add the missing combatants and made himself known. He also added himself to the tournament, meaning you have to defeat not only the Eternal Champion, but the Dark Champion as well. Kinda reminds me of Loki's ending on how everything will just start again with multiple universes. Anyway, back to the story. So all the combatants are plucked from their timelines again, and now maybe this time they can save the world. So since we're following Trident's story, here we are. Trident's basically got to fight the whole tournament all over again. But holy moly, one thing that is a ton easier and crazy in this game is all the ways people can die. This game had some of the most gruesome finishers in fighting game history. So gruesome that even Maximilian Dude had to say,
I love this game.
Just so messed up. Also, the graphics, animations, details, and colors have really improved in this game, and it's honestly one of Sega CD's best games. Trident once again joins the tournament and moves through opponents like before, new and old. And then near the end, the battle with the Eternal Champion is mostly similar. But then, oh no, he's got more forms. What a pain, come on man. So Trident beats the Eternal Champion. And now, it's time for a fight with the Dark Champion. Time for a similar but different fight with several forms. The hope is that hopefully after this battle, it'll finally be over. So once again, Trident goes back. But wait a sec. The last time he went back, he didn't kill the Roman, but in this shot, he's holding the Roman's head above his own. So apparently what happened is that like previously, Trident did not want to kill the Roman, but everyone in the audience was after bloodlust, insisting that Trident kill the guy. Trident wanted no part in it and walked away from his opponent and the crowd. But unfortunately, the Roman came after him by surprise, so Trident had no choice but to kill him with a final death blow. That's why he killed the guy. So apparently, in this altered reality, the outcome changed for Trident. So it seems some of the onlookers were completely shocked by this incident, many of them scientists. So there were those that witnessed the event, then there was Trident, and then other scientists who voluntarily chose to live under the sea until man could learn to conquer the violence that consumed them. In this ending, Trident continued to live under the sea for almost eternity because he's almost immortal, since he was genetically created. He hoped one day to return to the surface, and that's it for Trident. Or is it? Was that the end? Once again, nope. Now bear with me on this, because at this point the story, even though you just played through the game and finished it, this is where the story gets really complex and deals with a lot, so just bear with me. After the ending, the Dark Champion makes it clear that it's not over because time will once again reset and the tournament shall occur again. As you've seen, each occurrence of the tournament caused a different outcome. At this point, the Eternal Champion and the Dark Champion just destroy each other, and you see everyone's deaths just play out, so the loop wasn't closed. Then you see the Dark Champion stand in front of another unrevealed group of fighters. Who are they? What's going on? Do they need to be uncovered before the tournament can finally save the world? After this happens, you get more scrolling text revealing more about the truth, but let me summarize it here. So as we've already established, the whole world is dependent on these fighters going back on surviving their events, which was causing the paradox in time, making everything start again and again. So what's revealed in this text is that there are two groups trying to resolve the situation, the Eternals and the Infernals. Though it's not clear what fighters belong to either side, it's revealed that all members of a specific team must clear their paradoxes so that all the members can return together forever, basically fixing the whole situation. So why not just send one team back? Well, initially, the Eternal Champion said in the first game that he only had the powers to send one back, so there's that. But in this additional text, more is revealed. It states that time itself is constant and is not exactly easy to manipulate. With that being said, when a champion or infernal goes back to their native time with the extra knowledge to save themselves, it causes an instability with the time stream, almost like creating its own branched reality. Again, hearkening back to Loki. Basically, when a branched reality happens, the champion or infernal turns into colorful energy and can't affect anything in the material world. This basically doesn't help the world in any way. This is why it has to be a whole team that fixes their reality together, rather than just one individual winner. So the problem that exists is that one side sends in a couple of their members to save their end, the opposite team's same number of members become trapped in a time distortion, unable to move or act. This is why an entire team must go back and change their fates quickly before the opposing side can do it first, or else they'll be frozen and unable to do anything. Each side has to send the right mix of past, present, and future warriors in a chess-like fashion so that they can win as quickly as possible. So Dark Champion and Eternal Champion treat their armies like chess pieces on an ever-changing board called Chaos. Basically, the battle can potentially consist forever because as one side may be weak today, they can mount a comeback and grow tomorrow. But then, the game warns you that a stalemate must never occur, because both sides would be destroyed and only chaos would remain, which is the greatest evil. What the heck is chaos in this series? So that's all that the game reveals. After seeing that ending, I kept replaying the game over and over again, thinking there was a way to see the true ending if I beat it over and over again with the right warriors. Never happened though. Upon looking up more info, there was supposed to be a third game that would conclude the story, introduce more warriors, which was probably what the Dark Champion was hinting at, and of course, introduce a third type of champion into the mix called Chaos. This would have then finally resolved this really deep and complex story. So many questions still exist. What is Chaos? Who are the hidden champions? Which characters are considered champions and which characters are considered infernals? Will the time paradoxes ever be finally fixed? The answer to all of those questions have yet to be resolved. Eternal Champions is a game that's a couple of years away from being 30 years old, and it's barely even mentioned by Sega. Why? Well, the game series was developed by Sega of America. Sega of Japan had Virtua Fighter. Sega wanted only one fighting game series on their label to succeed, and of course, they chose Yu Suzuki's Virtua Fighter. Now, I love the fighting mechanics in that game, and I absolutely adore Yu Suzuki's work, especially everything he did for Shenmue. But the fact that Virtua Fighter basically caused this franchise to be completely canned still hurts. So here's my ask. If you're watching this video, first, I hope you enjoyed it and subscribed, liked, and all the good stuff. But even more important than that, would you help spread the message that we need to get the final chapter for Eternal Champions? If we could bring Shenmue back, then we can do this. Thanks for watching this video, guys, and as always, this is Magnus, and I'm out. See you guys later.